Hello, this is Dan Beck, and I've got a parable for you called the 10 Virgins. And this parable is about five wise and five foolish virgins. Now, the parable is worded this way that the five foolish virgins brought their lamps, but they did not bring extra oil with them. But the five wise virgins bought extra oil in their lamps, and they were to wait for the bridegroom's arrival. And so, one can imagine perhaps they were in a garden area, and next to the castle or wherever this wedding was going to take place. And so they're waiting out there, and it says the five foolish did not bring extra oil, but the five wise bought extra oil for their lamps. And while the bridegroom tarried, or while he took a while to arrive, they all fell asleep. And so he's talking about the uh, five foolish virgins first and the five wise virgins second. And while he tarried, they all fell asleep. And they woke up, the call came at midnight. They woke up to trim their lamps. The bridegroom comes. And so, as they were preparing their lamps, the foolish said to the wise, "Give us of your oil, for some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." Well, the five wise virgins, they were a group. They were perhaps friends. They were together, just like the five foolish virgins were probably friends and together. And maybe one spokesperson spoke for all five of each. At any rate, the request was made, and the answer was no. We can't do that. We don't want to do that because there may not be enough for you and for us also. Uh, Rather, you should go into town and purchase from the merchants in town the oil that you want for your lamps. And so, while the foolish virgins left, taking the advice of the wise virgins, as they left, uh, it says that the bridegroom came, and he took those that were ready into the feast, and the door was shut. Later, the others came. It doesn't say the foolish virgins; it says those others came, and they knocked on the door, and the answer from within said, "I know you not." They said, "Let us in." And he said, "I know you not." Well, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because these all 10, I'm sure, were given invitation to come to in the beginning. But it seems that this idea of not being prepared and not knowing the time that the prince was going to come, and it was like the prince was insulted because they weren't ready when they should have been ready when he was ready, even though he was late. They should have been waiting attentively with all the necessary things that they needed to go in at once. Well, Jesus puts forth his parable, and at the end of the parable, he says, "Therefore, be prepared. You don't know the hour that the Son of Man comes." And he says, "Therefore, stay awake." And now, this is why he's probably going to get me in trouble, but it clearly states that he was talking about the five wise virgins right before he mentioned that the prince tarried and they all fell asleep. Well, is it safe to think that the wise virgins fell asleep? Perhaps the foolish virgins, perhaps all 10 of them fell asleep. But we have a clue here that the five wise virgins fell asleep. And Jesus takes an issue with this falling asleep, not with running out of oil, not with being prepared, on time, but that they don't know the hour and that they fell asleep. And so I'm going to venture to say that, that the wise virgins were wise by man's standards, not by God's standards, that they were not spiritually wise. If they were spiritually wise, I don't think that spiritually uh, it's wise to, if you care about somebody, to just treat them like a stranger and say, you know, uh, you know, every man for himself, there may not be enough. The thought that there may not be enough, Jesus chose that word, I believe, carefully, is because that's the case in almost every instance where people don't share. They always have a fear. Oh, gee, there may not be enough. There may not be enough. I'm going to regret I shared because there may not be enough. And Jesus is talking about letting your light shine and being a sharing kind of a person, being inclined to share. He says, lend to those who would borrow of thee and turn not away. That's to say, don't let the person have to ask you to borrow. You figure out they're going to need this, and you give it to them because they would be inclined to ask you, perhaps they're too embarrassed to ask. So give to those who would borrow of thee and turn not away. That seems like a pretty direct statement. There's no parable there. Now, if in fact the bridegroom met the girls who were on their way to buy the oil while he was on their way to meet all 10 of them, he would have said, what are you doing? And they would have said, well, we're on our way. Our lamps are going out. Well, you see, we never really defined whether the lamps are completely gone out or not. So perhaps they, in fact, in trying to pursue and get extra oil for the lamps to have later on when they were in the feast, perhaps that wasn't necessarily all that they had to do to be ready. And in fact, that the assessment, I think, could easily be made by the bridegroom in this circumstance to say, why in the heck didn't they take responsibility for the others that were with them? I invited all 10 of them, and they couldn't be nice enough to just look out for the other 5 that didn't have the wisdom that they had. And I think, that's exactly the justice that they deserve, that they treated those foolish virgins, by worldly standards, foolish virgins, as strangers. And only in that circumstance then would God, the loving God, and for Jesus, who judges no man, but if he judges, his judgment is just, because he judges the way that we would judge. He judges us by our own standards. That's the very point of the golden rule, is do unto others as you would have them do to you. And that, my friends, means that the parable of the 10 virgins has been totally and for some time sealed or misinterpreted from its original intent. And Jesus said he will speak in parables, so that hearing they will not hear and seeing they will not see. This parable is one of those parables that you can take 2 different ways, and you have to decide what is it to be wise. And if you know or read enough, you'll realize that God has been challenging man's wisdom from the beginning, when man wanted to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because it was something to be desired to make one wise. Well, there you have it. That's the parable of the 10 virgins. That's the way that my Father revealed it to me after much prayer, because I saw it back afterwards, just like everybody else did for a long time, but it wasn't satisfying to my spirit, and I don't think it's satisfying to a lot of people's spirit who are honest with themselves about it. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Share that oil. Let your light shine. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button and come back for a few more of my parables. If this one doesn't get me killed, have a great day. Bye.